to you. In today's video, I'm going to show you what some common woodland Native American weapons would have looked like and been around the 1700s. Now, a lot of people, when they think of Native American weapons, they think of bows and arrows, spears, clubs, shields, and all those things, yes, did exist in the Native American arsenal, but in today's video, we're going to focus on the weapons of the woodland region around the 1700s. As far as spears went, that wasn't something that was really used for war. It was something that may exist for like fishing purposes, but not so much for war. And as far as shields went, those were practically non-existent because you could, in the woodland regions, it was all forest, and there were so many things like trees and stuff to use for cover already. They didn't really need shields. Bows did exist, but around by the 1700s, and in most situations when natives met European contact, they acquired guns very quickly, and by the 1700s, that's no exchange difference. So most woodland natives were already carrying a flintlock musket like this one, and this was also a time of the French and Indian War, so you had a lot of the British carrying brown vestes, you had a lot of the French carrying the Charlevilles, but a lot of random Indian trade guns were also going around at the time. So you saw most woodland Native American warriors, almost all, were carrying a rifle very similar to this one for hunting and war purposes. So it was a common sight to see woodland Native Americans at this point packing a flintlock rifle. Now, as far as flintlock pistols went, it wasn't completely out of place to see a woodland Native American warrior carrying a pistol like this one, but it wasn't as common as the rifle. It was more something that if it was either salvaged off the battlefield or a trade item among an important member of the tribe, used for, status purpose mostly. Bows still did exist among woodland cultures and regions, and they were still used in the 1700s, mostly for hunting purposes or for teaching small children. And the reason these still were still relevant at the time, even after the flintlock rifles came out, was because when you ran out of arrows, you could just make new ones. You didn't have to trade for them like you did round ball and powder. So it was still pretty common to see woodland natives carrying the bow. As far as quivers went, some quivers would be just some basic animal hide, like fox skins or something. But a lot of quivers were decorated, like this one here is woven out of natural fibers like jute, and it's decorated with some coyote fur around the top, and trade cloth and beads and some red scalp blocks. So a lot of quivers would be decorated for status purposes among the woodland native tribes. As far as knives would go, prior to European contact, the flint knife would have been the native weapon. But by the 1700s, the flint knife was mostly obsolete. You might still see a flint knife being carried maybe by a child or a woman in a village, but for the most part, metal tools had definitely hit the streets, and the metal tools were metal trade knives were the most common thing. So most woodland natives would be carrying a simple, basic metal trade scalping knife, similar to this one. Now in woodland culture, the schleif itself was almost as important, if not more important, than the knife. The schleif would be decorated with scalp blocks or something, but also be decorated with quill work, dyed quill work like this one here. And this quill work would normally show what tribe the woodland warrior would come from, because each tribe would have its own designs, and also might have a symbolic meaning to the design. So it was very common to see almost all woodland Indian warriors carrying a knife schleif that would be worn around the neck like this, and that was a really important common thing seen. Now, as far as like hand-to-hand melee weapons, that was still really common because a lot of the weapons at the time, only like the flintlock, only had one shot before they had to be reloaded. So a lot of hand-to-hand combat did occur. So most woodland Native Americans would carry a weapon for that, and that would either be, it was common to see metal trade tomahawks, because one, they could be used to cut wood, but they could also be thrown. Now, whether that was done in battle or just done for entertainment purposes is debated, because if you throw it in battle, you're likely to lose it. So, yeah, it's not really sure whether that was a battle thing or if that was just something woodland natives did for pleasure, but they did throw tomahawks similar to this one. Now, before European contact, a lot of Native Americans would have clubs, and they would carry clubs for hand-to-hand combat. And this still existed after European contact, mainly because a club is still a viable tool even against a tomahawk for hand-to-hand, because you can really do some damage hitting somebody with a big wooden club. But also, they could be made, like I said, they didn't have to be traded for, and a lot of clubs would have carvings on them that would have important designs. Now, to the woodland region, the most common club was the ball-headed war club. Now, these clubs would be similar to this one. They'd be long, and they'd have a ball-type shape carved at the top of them, hence the name ball-headed war club. So this is something that was very common, and this is a staple of the woodland Indian region, is a club like this. And these ball-headed war clubs were carved. A lot of people ask me, how did they carve these? And if you ever walk around the forest, you'll notice on trees they'll have a knot growing out on the side of them normally. And these knots would be, like this one, would be cut off of the tree, and then they would use that knot to carve the club head. Now, once metal tools came around, you could get really nicely carved clubs like this one, where you could it's almost impossible to tell that it was carved from a knot of a tree originally. But prior to European contact, a lot of clubs like this one still had remnants of the knotted wood from the tree, so you can still see that in the club itself. But like I said, a lot of clubs would be decorated with carvings or tacks, and these carvings would either be of an animal or something spiritually important, like the panther or something, and or even a warrior itself would be carved into the club. And this was to give symbolic. These would have symbolic meanings and to give power and strength to the warrior who carried them themselves into battle. Now, one club that wasn't like the ball-headed war club, that didn't have that ball-headed shape, was the Gunstock war club. Now, this type of club is not just specific to the woodland region, but also the plains region. But they differed a little bit, and this one here is kind of styled more off of a woodland regions type of club. Now, these would be shaped like a gunstock, hence where they got their name. Most people theorize is they're shaped to a gunstock, how they resemble one. But these would also be affixed with a metal arrowhead, or even a flint one, because these did predate European contact, this style of club. But they, most of the time at this point, they would have the metal tip. So they doubled as a good club, but they also kind of doubled as an axe. So they were definitely a very deadly tool. And one famous example of these is, if you ever seen the movie Last of the Mohicans, the character in that movie carries one of these, a blue one. So they're, like I said, very common tool used among the woodland regions. Now, one last thing I'd like to point out and show today is this isn't a weapon per se, but it was something very commonly carried among Indians of the time, woodland Indians. And these would be called prisoner ties or prisoner halters. And now commonly in a woodland region, if a woman or child was taken prisoner, they would normally be adopted into the tribe. That was quite a different story if a man was taken prisoner. Sadly, in most cases, if lucky, they would be traded for bounty. If not, they would often be taken back and tortured. It was kind of a way to test how he died, whether they died like a man or a dog. And that was a real statement of how the respect given to either what tribe that man came from or what, race they were, and that was judged upon how strong that whole entire group of people were. Now, this one here would be used, this halter here, this tie here would be decorated. They would often be decorated. That was an important part of them, decorations. And they were, this one here would be used to bound the hands together and then led by their captor. But this one here is a prisoner halter, and this one would go around your neck and be tightened around your neck like so. So it would be tied to your neck, and then this one would come down and be tied to the rope itself. So they'd have them bound around the hands like so, and then they'd have a halter on the neck that would tie to the hands, so you'd be walked like this, and then they'd be led almost in a line by the whoever their captors were at the time. So that's just a quick video showing you what some common weapons would have been carried by the woodland region Native Americans. I hope to do another video in the future. I hope everyone enjoyed the video today. If you did, please hit that like and subscribe button. I appreciate it a lot. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you, and